One, two, three.
Hello, hello. Can you guys hear me? Hey, Kurt. Hey, Mark. Hey, Dusty. Can you guys see my screen?
Yeah.
Cool. How's everybody doing?
Life is pretty good.
Good, good. Good to hear you guys. I am jet lagged, literally a 12-hour time difference. So flipping the day on its head. Yeah, I've been watching, really since the breakdown and haven't been too interested in much until right here. It's starting to become interesting. So
should I go ahead and record?
Yeah, let's give everybody like another minute to get in the room, and then we'll get it kicked off.
All right. Yeah, that was like the perfect stop rate. Really, it just cracked its nose right below support,
yeah.
and then just flying uppercut.
Yep.
When
it was like, I'm going to wait for lower prices, and then we're going to pump Bitcoin.
Yeah, some Jedi mind trickery made it look like it was breaking down from a 3-week consolidation.
Yep. Hey, what's up, Kyle?
I noticed the biggest moves tend to happen when during CME closing hours. They love moving the markets on weekends.
Yep, they try to catch it when nobody's paying attention.
Yeah. Hey, did you before I start recording, did you see that news where the former chairman of the CFTC came out and said that they launched CME futures specifically to pop the bubble, and it worked, the Bitcoin bubble?
Yeah, I saw that. Did he personally say that, or was that like speculation?
No, I think he said that on a panel.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, he knew like, okay, if we launch this, it's going to give an opportunity to have like a strong opposite side to the demand supply chain, right? So like it makes sense. And I mean, the market report that we put out that month basically called for it. So it's really not a surprise. But it's funny if he actually said like, oh yeah, we did that on purpose.
Yeah, well, like, when we did the report, it was just like a hypothesis, and I saw it as like, well, it's cash settled, so it doesn't actually affect the underlying supply. In fact, it can absorb some of the demand and basically create fake supply on the market that's not really affecting the underlying supply and demand of Bitcoin. And so it's interesting for him to come out like, a year and a half later or whatever, kind of confirming that hypothesis, even though like obviously the price action kind of confirmed it. But to say that they had thought of that intentionally is like a whole other can of worms, really.
Yeah, I mean, because they did it with that other, I think it was a metals market, right? Like titanium or something. You remember?
I'm not sure about the titanium thing. I've heard theories about them suppressing gold price.
Yeah. No, there was one where there was it was definitely a commodity. Like I want to say it was a metal that was in a bubble. Uranium. Okay. Thanks, Dustin. Uranium. Yeah, it was in a bubble, and then they launched, and that I think the day of launch was like the high or close to it.
Yeah. Now the interesting thing with Bitcoin is it's kind of difficult for them to actually tame the beast, because they have like this huge disadvantage of having like 9 to 5 operating hours, and markets being distributed all across the world, and supply and demand being all across the world. Whereas like if you look at something like uranium market, it's very arbitrary, right? Like people are trading uranium OTC through business, but there wasn't like probably necessarily like a proper digitalized market for that, right?
Yeah.
Whereas like Bitcoin came in with a fully evolved market already. So I'm not sure how much long-term control they could actually have over price discovery just based on futures, because there's such a wide distribution of global markets. I mean, when you think about it, Bitcoin's probably like it's got probably like one of the most global markets in the world as far as like exchange supply distribution,
Yeah.
Like you trade like major stocks on New York Stock Exchange or NASDAQ, and it's like, maybe some futures, and maybe there's like some derivatives exchanges, or, some other types of contracts. But Bitcoin, it's like, how many exchanges are there now?
Yeah. I mean, if anything, to me, it was like a self-fulfilling prophecy. And, obviously when people see that happen, and then those futures contracts pull back, then naturally like the spot markets would follow. But anyway, you guys ready to get rolling?
Yeah, I'll hit record. All right, good to go.
Cool. All right. Hey guys. So this is Chris. I'm back in action. Happy Halloween. Today is 10/31/19. And I am jet lagged like crazy right now. So I'm going to do Bitcoin and talk about my thoughts. I'm actually getting interested in price action again for the first time since like September. So I'll just kind of walk through the big picture, walk through my possibilities, probabilities, and plans. And then we've actually got some exciting stuff. Rocky was kind of talking about this in chat, but there's some exciting opportunity for him on the tax side where he's going to be able to trade a little bit more actively without having to worry about the tax implications and the nightmares that he's gone through trying to track and pay everything. And also we've got some exciting stuff with Tezos, just some really strong development. And I know you guys have also been talking about that in chat. So got a bunch on the board today.
Absolutely.
All right. So let's just give a little bit of context to where we are today. Okay. So just to kind of recap, I guess the whole year or more, had the 17 bubble, came down, 6K line of hope, broke down. We started accumulating through here, added on the break, happened to be the 200 moving average break as well, which was kind of the official sign that we're back in bull territory. Had some nice moves to the upside, took some profit through here. Then in July, through the summer, you can see through here, things were still looking bullish, right? Phase 2 type price action, run retracement, run retracement, run retracement. We had 10K acting as support. The problem was, in my opinion, market sentiment was like very, very bullish. It was like almost a crowded trade. And so even though I was long, if you go back and look at all the trade alerts and watch lists and classes throughout this time, I think you can get a really good sense of my hesitation through here and just the downside risk that we had. And then what I looked to do on this was, because I had an average cost slightly below 10K, if we broke down below this consolidation point, I knew we were going to get a washout to the next major structure zone, and I didn't want to just leave that position open. So on the breakdown, I minimized the risk and just cut it as a graceful exit. And then what happened, if you kind of look technically, on like a literal technical basis, whenever you're below the 100 and the 200, and that starts to act as resistance, you are technically at that point in a bear market, right? Now, bear markets don't always give follow through. So you can get fake outs. Obviously, anything can happen. And if you go back and read what I was saying through here, I said, you have the potential for a short, but I don't like trading mid-range, so I'm going to stay away. So what does that mean, mid-range? Well, if we look at kind of this as the start of the bull market on the 4K break, we went all the way up to call it 14K. So if we look at this as one major run, and we look at that as the bull run, right? And we can use Fibonacci retracement to measure that. At this point, you're basically at the 61% extension, right? And you also have a lot of support through the like 7K, 7,500 zone. So things can get choppy when you're mid-range like this, as opposed to like if we look back at the Coinbase wasn't trading during the 2014 bear market, but if we look at, let's do Bitstamp. If we go back here, you can see how on the first break things got kind of choppy, right? But then once you were completely rolled over and you had an established bear trend, this is really like the most ideal time to be shorting. But when you're mid-range and things are just choppy, like right here where you're getting crossovers on either side, there's just a lot of traps, right? So like through here, I had some nice dip buys and eventually did take a short. I think it was actually on the dead cat up here around 900. But really, the most compelling short opportunities come when you are in a confirmed downtrend, right? And usually the first pullback or the first like crash mid-range, you get some kind of bounce, right? And obviously there was a quote unquote black swan event, right? Which a black swan event could be news, it could be technical. It's anything that happens that is not predicted, right? So when China came out and said, yeah, we're blockchain, blah, 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 right? And Rocky's talked extensively about this. It gave a little juice to the market, right? And basically what happened is you had a bear trap. So we had a nice 1, 2, 3, 4 breakdown. We had a snap of support. Those events happen. We got a flurry. If you go back and do a Google search for this day, October 25th, if you go and do a Google search for like Bitcoin price on this day, you'll see everybody, Forbes, Bloomberg, CNBC, everybody was talking about, oh, Bitcoin's up, Bitcoin's up. And so what that does is it typically gives a few days of follow through. So like this day, it was up 15, 16%. And so what happens is you typically get some follow through, people chasing after that. They're like, oh, Bitcoin's back. Okay, let me go ahead and jump right in. And then they end up buying on the second or the third day. So you can see here on the second day, this actually went kind of parabolic. Let me see on a percentage. It at its highest, it was up over 20%. And then it closed at about 7%. Right. So this is what happened. Price surges on that second day when people that aren't really paying attention kind of wake up and they end up creating the top because they buy the high. Right. And the fact that we never got to close back above the 100 moving average, that actually becomes resistance. Right. So you can see now on the daily, we've got the 200 as support and we've got the 100 as resistance. And we've basically got a really interesting squeeze happening right here. I kind of like this. Whenever we have an opportunity where both of these moving averages are squeezing together and it's kind of unclear. Once we break out of this range, it's usually a sign that a big move is coming. So let's talk about the bull side of this. Okay. So again, you can see we basically did a 61% retracement here. So if we take a look at the extension off of the low, measure the anchor high to the pivot low, you can come up with some targets here. So the first 61% extension would line up with a double top here at 14K, 13, 14K. And then the 100% lines up conveniently on the dead cat near the high, right? So 17K. So this is, if I were to begin looking for long setups somewhere around here, you could base your risk to reward based off of these two zones first, right? So if we kind of, with that in mind, if we zoom in, oh, and one more point let me kind of clean this up a little bit. One more point here is we've got 10K. We've talked about this for like 6 months now, how 10K is acting like a magnet, which means when price gets above it, it pulls back to it as support. When it gets below it, it pulls back to it as resistance. And you can see price has just been like whipsawing over, under, and it came down and it's like, oh, we're way below 10K. Nope, pulled right back to it. So, to me, my opinion, and again, this is just kind of a bias or something that I see with like kind of judging market sentiment, is the longer that we hang out around 10K, the more bullish that is for me. You know, like back here when price went from 8K to 10K in a couple of days and then obviously got way, way overextended, that's unsustainable, right? And we've talked for now years about why and market cycles and all that good stuff. But after the market cycle has recovered and we've gone into another one, to me, the more time we spend around 10K, the more sustainable that is. What do you think, Rock? I know we've talked about this. You have anything to add to that?
Yeah, absolutely. It's a huge symbolic number, 5-digit Bitcoin, big round emotional milestone, similar to the 1K area when Bitcoin hit 4 digits for the first time.
Yeah.
And I agree. Like in the bear trend of 2018. 6K seemed to be a major zone. We just kept like bouncing off that 6K zone, and it kept getting attracted, but with selling pressure.
Yeah.
And so to see us like using a 10K, the 5-digit, as a magnet zone, I think that's good. It's good for being able to gauge like genuine demand on supply. Is the market truly willing to value Bitcoin at 10K, right? And obviously, like, it's got to be conquered. It's not necessarily an easy feat to do, but the more we consolidate at this 10K zone, if it does decide to break out, it's going to make the bull trend and breakout that much more sustainable as far as stair stepping up versus like just shooting straight up. Like, I'm actually happy that we had a correction and stuff from the 14K area. I was anticipating it. I'm happy that it happened. If we would have just shot up right to 20K or whatever, I like what I said before the crash. I said, I'd probably have to batten down the hatches for another shitstorm, another trend, because that's not sustainable when you go up on hot air. So to have these long periods of consolidation is actually a really, really good thing.
Yeah. And the market structure is actually nice. So if you look at this breakout is kind of the first leg above 4K. Then we had the second leg to like 8K. Then we had the third leg to 14K. So run retracement, you get 3 legs up. Consolidate, you get a breakdown that's a 61% retracement of the whole trend, right? And then now if we look at that as a much larger potential and we have some immediate targets for an opportunity, what I would do next is zoom in. We can like kind of zoom in a little bit closer on this, and you can see there's structure support here at 9K. Now there's a couple ways that somebody could play this. There's basically 2 types of trades here. There's the anticipatory trade and there's the reactionary trade. So the anticipatory trade is like a buy at support, anticipating that it's going to hold, right? So like you base risk off of this low at 9K and you say, okay, we've got market structure support. Buyers are showing strength here. So you buy somewhere in here and then you set your risk to reward based on that. Right. So the reward side is a lot stronger, but the risk is higher because you're buying mid-range. Right. So I'll just type that out. So the anticipatory trade is buy close to support and base risk off lows. Right, off of the basically like the 9K pullback, right? So the good news, like the positive side to that, is your reward is higher. The probability of getting stopped is also higher because you haven't had confirmation that we have a breakout yet. Right. So what could happen is you could get like a shakeout, like say you get like a little bit of strength here and then it stabs down to like retest. You can see a lot of support through the 8,700 level. Right. So say it wants to stab down a little bit further and shake a bunch of people out. That's what that would look like.
I almost kind of view that possibility as more probable, just based on
Yeah.
the way the market's behaving and based on the recent stop order hunts.
Yeah. Yeah, I completely agree, man. Like things, when you're mid-range like this, things get more dangerous. There's more stop hunting. There's more, Bart Simpson type price action. So for me, I prefer the other type of setup, which is reactionary, right? Or a responsive type trade. So reactionary is where you wait for a break of a key resistance level indicating bulls are in control and the probability of that trade working is much, much higher. So yeah, like I would give this an anticipatory trade from here. I would give that, say, less than a 50% probability, where if you waited for a 1, 2, 3, 4 breakout above 10K, I would give that, and again, this is just my opinion. I don't have data to actually back this up, but in my opinion, that could be like a 70 to 80% probability that you're going to hit the next major target if you wait for a 1, 2, 3, 4 break. So something like, say, price comes up, challenges the high, and then you get, a little consolidation. And you have 1, 2 touches through here. Also, I mean, really, you could even set that lower. You could say 97.75 because you can see most of the price action. You got kind of that parabolic spike, but most of the trading happened under 97.50 or so, right? Kind of this price area. So like I would say, like say it came up and it did this, right? Where it challenged this high, consolidated, and then you got a high volume break. If that happened, if we got above 9,700 or 9,800, my guess, and I haven't checked the short levels yet, but my guess would be that we would get a pop stop run that would go very quickly from like 9,800 to above 10K quickly. Because what would happen is anybody that was short through here, their stops are probably somewhere back behind this area, right? They're probably stacked all up and down this zone. So if you got a breakthrough, not only would that trigger, right? Because you'd have buy stop orders hit, but then you'd have breakout buy orders, right? And then you'd have sell limits get pulled, right? So that combination of market activity creates really fast price movement, right? So that's what I would look for. I'm not interested in kind of guessing if this is going to be the low. Like if you guys caught the low, like on the double bottom, cool. But you just need to know that the probability of the market not going lower from here is probably not over 50%. Like it could chop around, it could spike. I mean, you could even get like a mini like flash crash through here, or in 5 minutes we could break up and be up at 9,700, right? The whole mentality though is on an anticipatory trade. You are entering the market without confirmation that the market is telling you something. What you're doing is you're entering, anticipating that that's what it's going to do, but you don't have compelling proof that buyers are in control yet, right? Whereas if you have a story like a reactionary trade, which is an if-then statement, where it says, okay, if we get up to this level, I know there's a lot of stops. I know a lot of eyeballs are going to be watching this. And if we get a breakthrough, I know I can get in close to this area, still have good risk to reward, right? And let's say it does respect, let's say we use 8K or let's say 8,500 as the risk zone for a breakout. So like let's say it looks something like that, where like it chops around a little bit. And then let's say we use 8,500 as the stop. And then we know that the first profit target is up here at like, call it 13,500. So then you could create a trade plan. Where are my trade plans? You could create a long, man, my mind is so slow today.
Are you looking for the risk to reward?
Yeah.
It's right there. It's right there.
Oh my God. I need to get some sleep. Okay. I want to do this and pass it over to you.
Drink a 6-pack of Red Bull.
Oh my God, dude. I feel delirious. You know that point where you're like, what day is it? Okay. So say you get an entry up here, you set your risk here. And again, we're looking at it hourly. So these are going to look really big. I'll put it on the daily here in a second. So basically you're risking like, call it 10 to 15% initial risk to make at least like 35%, right? So this is what it would look like on the daily, which is really what we'd be looking at anyway. Let me pull this over. There we go. So that would be like you get a breakout above this level, right? So like say you got a daily close above 10K. That would, to me, be an indication that, hey, not only are we back up above both moving averages and back up above the magnet, but this could be a shift showing another leg of the bigger price trend, right? And then, so 35 would be kind of the first zone based on the 61% extension. Or if we go for the second, that would be like a 75% move.
If we could tag, if we could tag that 14K area again, and then have another big correction, and then chop around, I think it would be great to consolidate into 2020. I know that's probably not the option that a lot of people necessarily want to hear.
Yeah,
I think that's like the help, like. It's already a fairly healthy correction consolidation, but I also think that would be the best option for altcoins too.
Yeah.
It's getting some action in some other markets.
Yeah.
Is Bitcoin just broke a new high at 14K, then, alts will probably start bleeding out on the BTC charts again.
Yeah. I mean, who knows with the capital flow, right? Like it could be one of those things where we go to 14 and then we get a pullback and a lot of that money goes back into alts. Yeah. So, it could happen a few different ways. Oh, the other side though, so that's the kind of the bull side. The other side though is like, say that this is like, we don't get any kind of follow through and it just kind of continues to fade here. This is where the danger comes in with an anticipatory trade, is like, it could basically be a bull trap where we popped up and it's like, oh, okay, are we going to get some continuation here? And then it's like, oh no, you know what? That China news was actually kind of want anyway. And price just kind of fades off. And then if it chops around here in between like 7K and 10K, and it gets real choppy and low, say we go back into like a really low volume environment, like through here, and we don't get big expansive volume days like this, I would then go back into, okay, consolidation, don't overthink it, don't overtrade it mode.
Yeah. Yeah. The irony too with the China news is, like, China's been playing games with the market since 2013. We've been on the front lines of seeing that.
Yeah.
And they banned all the crypto exchanges in early 2017. And then there's a big panic sell-off as a result. But that actually turned out to be quite healthy for the markets because there's a lot of fake volume, a lot of crap that was going on. But they're all trading OTC through WePay now or whatever, WeChat. They're trading.
Yeah.
But the fact that
it's not smart because Big Brother can see all that.
Yeah, and so the thing that kind of irritates me with that whole news is, like, first of all, they just said blockchain, and they're doing it for their like centralized central bank coin and some AI surveillance system. And then you got like people like Pomp that are like cheering it on like little cheerleaders. I'm like, why are people cheering on a totalitarian, state, really?
Yeah, kind of reminds me of the Venezuela thing.
It's like, oh, it's pumping my bags. Woo! It's like, come on. Is this like, is this why we're into crypto? Like, yeah, it's nice to have bags pumping, but it's on hot air news. And guess what? They have their central bank coin in before another Bitcoin ban, right? In before like that. When the honeymoon phase of blockchain is over and it becomes cemented in their system, are they really going to want competing currencies? I don't know.
Yep.
They might crack down even harder on it. Which, of course, if we're so, if the price is reacting so much to that type of news, then naturally that will lead to a big shakeout and so on and so forth. But I just the cheerleading kind of annoys me a bit.
And that's where it gets dangerous, right? Is when everybody's like in agreement and everybody's overly bullish.
Yeah.
I actually had a dream about this last night. That is so weird. About the low in 2015. Like, I just remember the Twitter feed and like the market sentiment and people just like, I could just feel people at their desks like giving up, like being like, oh my God, Bitcoin's dead. Like when you have that extreme of a negative market sentiment, that's when I get the most excited. But when you have like people like freaking out over like China making that announcement, it's like, come on, guys. Like, I get that we want to see development and progress, but like, that's the wrong type of development and progress. But hey, if it gives momentum to the price action, it doesn't matter what the hell my opinion is, right? Yeah. Like I can have my own biases and my own opinions. I just have to understand that that's what they are, right? But if the market responds and they go, no, we really like this, and then we got follow through buying, so be it. Okay, that's fine. I'm not going to inject my bias and say like, oh, I'm not going to take any trade because I don't like China. Like that would, that's the wrong way to think about it.
Yeah, for sure. Absolutely. And, to me, there's two types of news events that would affect price. There are actual news events based on like real fundamentals, and then there's hype and hot air, right? Yeah. So like this China one, I would consider hype. The difference would be is if China came out and said, hey, we're accumulating Bitcoin as a basket of our reserve currencies or whatever.
Yeah.
And that would be a huge, fundamental, that would be a news event backed by like real fundamentals, not just hype and hot air, right?
Yeah. And I would be surprised if they're not doing that. Like I would put the odds really high that they are, but it would probably be I guess against their own best interest to actually come out and say that,
Yeah, it's a strange one because like, I think, there must be somewhere in the middle because like on the one hand, this is a global currency that's gaining traction and momentum, and maybe it's a matter of time before a nation state starts to do that. Then on the other hand, it's also the technology is also like, it's the antithesis of everything that they represent, which is like they don't have control over it necessarily.
Yeah.
Now, what they could end up doing is if they start doing more mining to try to control the network. So if they were to accumulate it as some kind of reserve currency, I would imagine they would invest billions in infrastructure so that they had a majority of the hashing power or something like that. So that way they could control it. But then if you start to get into that, I mean, well, what's like, are they going to censor transactions, rewrite the blockchain? Like what? Yeah. Like, and that's not going to fly very well with like traditional cypherpunk ideals. Right?
Yeah.
And just to specify, like I absolutely love Chinese culture. I've studied Kung Fu, I've been there and stuff. It's more some of the practices that the government is doing, human rights violations that I have issues with, right?
Yeah. I'll make that distinction too. Like the Chinese people are different than the CCP, right? So we can dislike the government, but still love the people of China.
Yeah, and they've been huge players in the crypto space, in the blockchain space.
Yeah, absolutely.
For years, since the early days, and still big players. I mean, right now, they're apparently they're like for their trading, they're doing it through the WeChat or whatever, but they're doing it like when a WeChat account apparently gets shut down, there's like some collusion or corruption involved where they have to reach out to some state.
Yeah, it was weird. So when I was in Asia, just one more tangent, then we can keep going. Last time I was in Asia, I didn't see anything about Bitcoin or Alipay. And when I was traveling through Bali and Thailand, and even like in Myanmar and Vietnam and stuff, like there's a bunch of, because the Chinese tourism has kicked up so much, there's now a bunch of signs everywhere. I posted one on Twitter saying we accept like Alipay.
Okay.
And what's the other one? WeChat Pay.
Yeah.
And I was like, big thumbs down, dude. Like, that's basically the same thing as like what we have in the US, like PayPal, which, what it does is it gives the government an ability to monitor. And with the social credit system and all the repressive stuff that's happening in China, I just think it's a terrible idea to use any of those platforms. So there were a couple of restaurants that took both. Actually, I'll put this image in the group later. But this one restaurant I went to, they were accepting Bitcoin, Litecoin, Ethereum, and Alipay. And I told the owner, I'm like, hey, can you just get rid of this one and then it'll be all good? And he's like, yeah, but we get so many Chinese tourists here. So
yeah, that's true. I guess they're very limited, I guess.
Mm-hmm.
Mind you, they could just send a traditional Bitcoin payment.
Yeah. So anyway, I don't know. That was just an observation I saw. So let's keep going, and then I'm going to go into La La Land here. Okay. So Ethereum, just, really no change over the past couple of months. We had a really great trade here in May, took the breakout, scaled out profits in the mid twos, almost tagged our profit target, the 100% extension, and then retreated very quickly. And then finally cut the last piece off. I think, what was it? 260 something. So nice little trade there, and haven't done anything with Ethereum since then. I just think it's kind of at this point, like in slow bleed category where, I've said this so many times over the past couple of months, but I'll just repeat it for anybody that hasn't heard me say it. There's so many ICO projects that were tied to Ethereum that add bearish pressure to it. And as a lot of those fail, I think that's going to kind of keep Ethereum's price bearish. So that's the fundamental side. The technical also lines up with that thesis. So we had a MA crossover back here in August, pull back. It's acting as resistance. And when I wrote this, I think this was the last time in September, and you can see price kind of followed what I was expecting. And here we are kind of bouncing off that resistance again. Now, if we do get a shift and we have a setup and something changes, great. Or if we get back to sub 100 prices, I might start accumulating again. But here again, kind of mid-range, I'm just not really interested about this price right now. And then also talking about Tezos, and I know Rock has some news that you'll start to talk about with this, but also kind of similar, just kind of mid-range. And this is one that, again, this is a longer-term play for me. We could have traded in it out of it on the way up. I mean, we had a great breakout and all this stuff, but for me, it's really just about being patient and seeing what this can do over time. So Rock, I'll pass it over to you, man. You can talk about the developments and the news with Tezos and also the Canadian tax stuff, and keep going.
All right. Sounds good, Chris.
Cool. Thanks, guys.
All right. Can everyone see my screen? All right. So I'll just I'll add some thoughts on the technicals, and then I'll dive into some news. So last Friday, I did kind of like an emergency, I guess you could say emergency update when Bitcoin kind of popped. A lot of altcoins had bled hard and dumped against the BTC charts. So we'll look at that. What was really interesting about this price action is this is like what I call Jedi mind trickery, right? So, we talked about this a lot before. We talked about how, our traditional bounce plays used to give a lot of pay dirt really quickly, right? There wasn't a lot of messing around. Like sometimes you get a slow grind sell off, but usually when it capitulated, you didn't have to wait around for like 3 weeks for a bounce, right? I mean, you look here, this is like one day, you know, a day, a day. It actually made bounce plays really easy to trade. Much easier to trade than they are today. Even here, right? And sometimes you get these little bounces, but then eventually when it hit the bottom, it would V-bottom pretty quickly. And if you bought a dip down here and it V-bottom and it was up here, well, now you're kind of, your risk is pretty much off the table, right? Because you just move your stop down and you've got a lot of buffer zone and it can kind of crawl up. But the initial bounces, most of the time they were all V-bottoms, right? So that was like the nature. Look at this one. That was the nature of the price action. But now, there's obviously other market participants and players. The game has changed a little bit. Sometimes you get nice little V-bottoms. So you still get them, especially like on the initial shakes. But like with this dip here, it's where I started to notice the price action change, the bounce plays change was when we traded this one right here. It was like literally pulling teeth, right? At 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13. It was like 2 weeks of sideways grind before the bounce. This was a nice sharp V bottom. This was almost say like one of the last major V bottoms that we've seen. I mean, we had this little dips here and a few here. So yeah, there are still some. But as far as like major dips off of a support zone, major like swing lows, this seemed to be the last major one, right? And this is where I noticed things start to change a little bit. We went sideways for 2 weeks, and I took that trade and bought that dip, but it was like pulling teeth, right? You buy a dip and you're kind of like waiting, looking on the edge of the cliff for 2 weeks as it just chops around, and then sometimes looks like it wants to break down. Like if you don't know what's happening and you just kind of look at it like this, you're on the bleeding edge. This kind of looks like it wants to break down, right? It's not so clear, right? It's not it's a sharp 1 day, 2 day V-bottom bounce, and then the same thing here. And then like even this capitulation, right? Like this is a massive breakdown off of the 6K zone. And where's the V-bottom, right? This is like this little tiny bounce right here is fairly pathetic, and this is pathetic. And then literally 3 months of grinding sideways. So, I bought a bunch of stuff, but basically just had to go on vacation, really. There's nothing to do besides wait for the price to actually do something, right? So it didn't even give you your typical like, at least retest of 6K. If it was like a 2015 market, you would have got at least a retest, V-bottom, and then a crash back down or something like that, right? And then on the retest, what's cool about that is you could take a lot of your risk off the table on the trade, lock in some profit, maybe clean up some bags, and then it drops again. You've got fresh capital. It's like you take a fresh shower and then you can buy some more stuff, right? A little less stressful. Here is definitely like pulling teeth. So what's really interesting about this is, this price action looked kind of, I was leaning towards a bounce, right? I was leaning towards a bounce because of that. And we had talked about this. Because of that, I was like, okay, well, these bounce plays have changed. So it wouldn't surprise me after these 3 weeks of consolidation if we actually did bounce and if this created a higher low on the trend for a healthy correction. But then what it ended up doing is it basically had a stop order run where, like, when you break 2 weeks of sideways consolidation and it starts to break down, you know, even though, I was saying like this is kind of like the last line of defense for the bull trend, it didn't look very good, right? It was very on edge. This is very choppy price action. And what was really interesting is that even if you drill down onto the smaller time frames, it actually even wicked down lower than its prior support line. If I were to, let me just thin this line out a bit. If I were just to draw a support line right through here, it actually not only did it stop order hunt anyone who's playing the range. A lot of people are playing the range, but if you were, buying a dip even right at support, it had wicked down for a few hours or whatnot, right below, kind of faking out the markets, making it look like it was going to break down. And so what I had said was, I saw a lot of people on social media kind of cheering for the 6K area, but my hypothesis is that if we went back down to the 6K area, that's too deep of a correction, in my opinion, for this bull trend to remain intact. I said if we break down below this like last line of support here, then that would be, in my opinion, way too deep of a correction for the bull trend, and then it starts to produce another large descending triangle. I saw a lot of people like, 6K is an accumulation zone. Well, I'm sorry, but I personally, I would definitely buy. My plan was I'd definitely buy a dip and go heavy on a bounce play at the 6K zone. But in my opinion, I don't necessarily think if we made it down to 6K, I wouldn't necessarily be a bull. It would just, this whole thing would look like a bull trap, lower high, and for all we know, could crack down even lower than prior support right here, right? So that's kind of like where my mindset was at. And obviously, I'm a Bitcoin bull when it's time to be bullish. So I've been bullish like all year, even especially like when we broke out of this lower range, calling it phase 2 of the bull trend. But the price was pushed. In my opinion, the price was pushed to its furthest max limit of pain. I mean, this is, for a Bitcoin correction, this is the deepest Bitcoin correction on a quote unquote healthy bull trend that I've seen, really. The only time you get anything deeper than that is bear trend. And so I wouldn't be, even though I would buy a dip and a bounce play and all that noise, I would mostly be doing that as damage control, to squeeze as much profit as I could to kind of like mitigate the drawdowns from long-term holdings and stuff if that 6K were to crack, right? And if we were to go into an even more prolonged bear trend. So the other thing that I had said on that update is, I said if we did hold 6K, this is before the Friday update, if we did hold 6K, what I would want to see is like, I'd want to see a very fast bounce. I'd want to see something aggressive, like some bullish engulfing candles, to show that the bull market still has strength, that the bull still has life in it. And indeed, it gave that. I also said that 10K would be an interesting zone to reassess. Now, at the time when I said that, because this whole magnet area zone, at the time when I said that, I did not anticipate we'd end up in 10K over the course of like a couple of days. That I did not really see coming. It shooting up so high. I thought maybe if we did bounce, we'd get a bullish engulfing here, correction, and then eventually kind of chop its way up. So now looking at altcoins, so far so good as far as like the Bitcoin bull trend is concerned. If as long as we hold up above this line here, and this is where was this on the fib retracements? This was like pretty much 0.618 zone, sweet spot right on the nose. As long as that holds up, even if it chops around or whatever, that's fine, right? Ideally, we'd see some follow through. To add to what Chris was saying as far as trade setups, I think there's another approach that one can also do. If one didn't want to just long here and kind of say stop. If I was actively trading this right now, what I would probably do is set some bids here in case it wants to retest this range, right, for a dip buy. Maybe it wicks down or whatnot, and then kind of just like bracket the markets, and then have like that 10K breakout zone. So it's like almost kind of can turn into a win-win, where like if it wicks down, you get a nice dip entry. Obviously, if it breaks down further, then one could just set a stop and cut out and be like, okay, well, maybe this is a bull trap. And then if it doesn't wick down there and crosses that line of resistance, then that can make an easy momentum trade as far as a breakout is concerned. So now we're going to look at altcoins. Let's see here. Coin market cap. There's something else that I had mentioned on Friday night, which is one of the reasons why I did emergency update. Let's see. What I had said was, when we did the update, this was the price action, right? So Bitcoin had made that huge move, that epic move. Altcoins had a knee-jerk reaction. At least we got some nice V bottoms on the alt BTC charts. Knee-jerk reaction response to that. That's just that's just the algorithms dumping alts for Bitcoin because they know the inverse correlation stuff on the alt BTC charts and so on and so forth. So that's the algos. And we were like on the bleeding edge. There were not really many bounces. We were looking through coins. The only coins that were kind of up in the green. I mean, a lot of them were kind of up in the green a little bit on the USD, but on the BTC charts, it's just like some random like smaller cap or mid cap shit coins. But we were just kind of going through the list to see if anything was responding positively. And I said what I would wait for to see before doing anything, to kind of just see how the markets were going to respond, is what I would like to see is when Bitcoin consolidates for altcoins to bounce on the BTC charts, therefore breaking new USD highs. And indeed, that happened to many coins across the board. It started off with the Chinese coins, like NEO and Ontology and TRX, stuff like that. But while everyone's focusing on that, one can just go hunt for other stuff because of correlation. They're all correlated anyways. So looking at my Atom trade, and at the time I said, I'm just gonna wait and see. I'm not gonna do anything with it. This would have been a nice little dip here. I guess someone kind of market ordered on that, but I was like, did this only happen on Kraken, by the way? So let me just look at, I'm going to go on another exchange because that kind of produces ugly price action. So I said, you know what? I'm not going to respond. I'm not going to react. Yeah, Bitcoin made a big move. A lot of alts dumped on the BTC charts. But I'm just gonna wait and see. I'm gonna, I've got a good entry, so I've got a lot of wiggle room. I'm gonna wait and see what happens, right? And indeed, what ended up happening was, I think Atom on some exchanges, anyways, kind of broke slightly new high. Still kind of chopping a bit, but my entry was at around 219. So I'm up almost 50% on this, right? Now, there's a part of me that's kind of disappointed in not trading Bitcoin I've said this many times. It messes up my accounting and taxes because I have two major investments. Like my long-term crypto portfolio comprises of two markets, the heaviest, right? Bitcoin and Tezos. Those are like the majority of my crypto portfolio. I've got a sprinkling and a smattering of some other stuff, but those are the biggest. Those are my big plays. So it's kind of and I've said this many times, but it's a bit of an accounting nightmare and a disadvantage for me. Any short-term Bitcoin trades that I take or mid-term Bitcoin trades that I take, they get lumped in with my long-term holdings. So, it's all based on cost averaging. So there's no way for me to actually separate them out. I wish I could, be like, okay, this is just like, in my mind, I have like short-term, mid-term, long-term bags type of thing, capital buckets. But the way the cost averaging, the accounting works in Canada, they don't see it that way, right? It's just like it all just gets pumped, put into the same pool. And so that really that really messes up the accounting. And I've kind of talked about this before. It's like if if I took a BTC trade, let's say like I bought here and sold up here type of thing. Well, there's obviously tax on like 36%, but I'm paying more tax than 36%, right? Because it's averaging with other Bitcoin, long-term holdings and stuff like that. So it messes it up. So it makes it even more costly. And then also it makes the accounting more confusing because now we've got to calculate all of that. So, the thing is with like this accounting stuff, obviously this has been my biggest Achilles heel. And, we adapt, right? One has to adapt. One has to get smart and adapt the strategy. I don't make up the rules, right? I can't control the winds, but I can adjust the sails of my boat, right? And so for me to be smart and strategic about it, I've been focusing my energy when I do make moves in the markets. I've been focusing my energy on altcoins that I don't own and focusing on the USD charts, not the BTC charts, because alt BTC trading is even more of a mess. It just it's even more messier. And another reason, like I just showed the profit potential. Another reason why it's a bad thing is like, let's say I take a trade and get stopped out at a loss. Well, even though the trade is a loss, depending on where the cost average is, that could still be considered a tax gain where I'd have to pay money. So then it becomes like a double loss. It's like not only do you take the hit on the loss of getting stopped out, but then you got to pay tax on that on top of that. So it gets pretty wild, right? So someone's saying don't really get the problem. You always have to pay average accumulation price eventually and sell in the future. Yeah, but the difference is that's pretty much just long-term buckets versus like mixing it up with shorter term trades, right? So for example, if I sell Atom right now, I make 50% off my trade. I know exactly, the accounting's simple. I've never owned it. I'm 50%. I know exactly how much I'm going to pay as far as tax and all that stuff. The accounting's not going to take me months to unravel. But here's the good news. So that kind of leads into some pretty major news that I posted in the chat. It's good news for me, Canadians, and I think this will also apply to Americans as well. Yeah, I've considered the whole moving thing to a tax-free jurisdiction, but there are other elements and dynamics to people's lives, like property, friends, family, all that kind of stuff. It's a huge change. It's kind of, it's been like a tug of war between the mind versus the heart type of thing. All right, but here's an interesting middle path. So big news broke out today on how a Bitcoin fund seems like it's getting the green light to get listed and start trading on the Toronto Stock Exchange. For me, this is a huge game changer. The reason being is because one will be able to buy Bitcoin. If you could buy Bitcoin through the Toronto Stock Exchange, TSX, it means you can buy it in a tax-free savings account as well as a retirement account, right? It's not 24/7, 365. So, obviously, like the strategy I would apply, I wouldn't be scalping on it or anything like that. I wouldn't be doing any day trading. You're not even really allowed to day trade on a tax-free savings account. You'll get challenged if you were day trading on it. It would basically just be for the bigger swings, which is mostly what I do anyways. So like a big swing would be, buying at 75 and selling at 10K or whatever type of thing, or holding some of it to see if it breaks new highs, so on and so forth. But to me, this is a really big game changer, and also for anyone else, even in Canada and the US, because I believe in the US, with your retirement accounts, IRA, stuff like that, you can buy stuff on the Toronto Stock Exchange, TSX, so Americans will have access to this as well. But for me, why this is a huge game changer is because I'll be able to trade and invest in Bitcoin tax-free, right? On a tax-free savings account is completely tax-free. Any profit you make, as long as you're not over trading or day trading. And then for RSP, it's just tax deferral, so you can just basically compound the money, compound the profits. And then the beautiful thing about that is there's zero accounting for me to do. I don't have to worry about cost averaging and accounting and all that crap. It'll make my life easier. Then long-term Bitcoin holdings that I have will just stay in their wallet. It won't move. And they'll just stay there until higher price points where I decide to take some more longer-term profit off the table. And then any like midterm activities for the bigger moves, I'll be able to actively focus on that. So that's basically just going to be a huge, it's just going to make things a lot easier for me, more stress-free, and I won't have to think about any of that stuff. So this is big news. Also, another reason why it's big news is because everyone's been clamoring for a Bitcoin ETF in the States. Well, this will effectively act pretty much like an ETF. Gemini's going to be doing the custodial services, so I'm pretty sure it's going to be backed by real Bitcoin in this fund. And because Americans will have access to it, we don't even need an American ETF anymore. You don't even need an ETF on New York Stock Exchange. So if the SEC decides they never want to approve it, then too bad, so sad. The option is still there and available for people. But because markets are competitive, if this gains traction, then perhaps they'll approve an American ETF as well, just to be competitive in the markets and just to follow suit, right? Especially like if they have like a live example of something that's functioning and addresses many of the concerns around risk and security and all that stuff. So I don't know when this is going to be launching. I hope they launch it sooner than later, so I can kind of start playing on Bitcoin. In the meantime, I'm just going to continue focusing on alts. This is a really nice move, 40%, but I'm up 50% on Cosmos, so I'm not really crying over that. Although because Bitcoin, I find the Bitcoin markets are actually probably easier to trade, more simpler to trade than altcoins, because with altcoins you got to constantly have to figure out the esoterics around its correlation to Bitcoin and how it's going to respond. Is it gonna? You've got to try to like figure out when you're going to have alt season. Otherwise, there's opportunity cost. And most of the time, so I'd say probably alt seasons, maybe only occur like 20% of the time, really, in a bull trend. Most of the time, most of the action is revolved around Bitcoin, right? So it's just a much cleaner, easier market to keep track of than altcoins. It's got good volatility, but it's not as volatile. It's a little bit more predictable, in my opinion, right? Easier to read. So it'd be nice to be able to start focusing on that a lot more, especially when alts are just kind of fluttering and not doing a whole lot. I did buy some other alts recently, kind of so right now. ICX got a little bit of a spike on Kraken, but that's just the Kraken issue. I don't think that's quite accurate as far as price discovery. Let's see, ICX kind of at or close to break-even point right now. So it's like a little bit of a slow cooker. We'll see if it can get some follow-through. Let's see. What's got the most price data on it? Let me just figure out what's got the most price data. Probably OKCoin. So you can see this thing is like 90. Yes, I have some Tezos news as well. I'll just finish up with the TA and then we'll get into that. So, this is like 98% smashed into the dirt from the highs, which I actually don't mind. So we broke this immediate descending trend line. Alts in the past week have been making gains over Bitcoin, many of them anyways, right? Once Bitcoin consolidated. So like obviously you can see Bitcoin's like 0.84, it's a mixed bag, and you've got other things that are up a bit more. A lot of things have kind of cooled down in this consolidation, like including a lot of those Chinese coins that were pumping, had big corrections. So obviously like the next area of resistance to break where we get some follow through is right here. So we broke one area of resistance, right? And if we can get some follow through and then break the other area of resistance, and then perhaps retest this as support, this resistance point as support, then if candles start to get big or have large wicks or whatnot, then I'd consider taking some profit. If I were to look at, let's say, fib retracement, obviously there's a lot of resistance in through here, which is 2 fib levels up. Let's say, I think that would certainly be reasonable. I'd probably take some profit there because there has been resistance even over in that zone right there, right? So I think that would be reasonable. Probably chop down, probably even can sell about 50% of the position if we can make it up to that area. It can be slow cookers, right? Like I've been holding that Cosmos position for like over a month now, a month and a week or something like that. And it's up 50%, but it's sure taking its time, right? It's chopping around. It's not a very fast moving altcoin market. With Cosmos, I'd like to hit at least 100%. I'd like to hit a double. We'll see. We'll see if it'll give me a double, but if we hit a double just based on kind of how slow and choppy the altcoin markets have been. At a double, I'd probably just sell 50%, take out all my risk capital, and then let the rest ride and see what comes of it. If I even wanted to have some as a longer term position, then basically that extra 50% could be risk free. Once you take out your initial risk capital, it's just a profit. Obviously, there's taxes too on that, so there's that to factor in as well on that profit. Waves, bought some waves. I was just honestly like, I don't even care about these coins, which kind of makes it nice too. Sometimes the best coins to trade are ones you don't give a shit about. Like if you feel a coin's a shit coin or whatever, it's a lot easier to just let go of it at certain price targets. This is kind of a little bit of a retrace. I was just kind of looking for random stuff that I didn't own that didn't pop off yet. This didn't quite break resistance. It is in a bit of a bear channel on the USD chart. So this is, I'd say, more just preemptive based on looking at other alts. I'm not married or attached to these coins. So if they were to break support, I'd probably just go for a graceful exit and just cut them. Confirmation would be if it can break out of this bear channel, then we'll probably get some momentum on that. Right now, it's still very much in a bear channel. Let's see if there's something that's got more price data. Okay. This is something like I actually got in on the Waves ICO way back 2016. I'm not seeing, there wasn't really any USD, a lot of USD charts back then. So it was all just like BTC. Even though, here's the thing, even though I'm not trading on the BTC pairs, for accounting, I'm trading on the USD pairs. I'm still very much watching the BTC pairs because in order for there to be traction and momentum for quote unquote alt season, they basically need to gain on the BTC pairs as well, right? It's not a true alt season unless it's gaining on BTC and USD pairs. So looking at the BTC TA is also important. It's kind of like wicked up, but seems to have done a big retrace here. So this doesn't hold up. It's kind of smashed, but alts can certainly go lower. It did break a support zone here that acted as resistance. So if it can break above this zone, this line, then I think we'll see some traction. I mean, in the perfect world, this is the type of traction I like to see, right? This is like really easy price action. You sell into strength, market's moving, it's not chopping around, it's making moves. Then it becomes really easy to sell, right? And then you're not on the bleeding edge. So that's the thing, their altcoins are usually dead. They chop around and then out of nowhere, they do things like this. They just make random moves. So we start to almost see a taste of that. So we'll see if there's any follow through in general. Looking at Doge. So we had the breakout above the 30 Satoshi zone, and it hasn't been able to bounce above that after that shakeout. Bounced a little bit, but nothing major yet, right? So obviously it's not ready to pop yet, right? That could be the first sign though. So if it could creep its head back above 30 Satoshis, again, this is a type of thing that I'm looking for, just like some really aggressive pumps. I basically, I stacked sell orders above 90. I just kind of set and forget, and when it's ready to pop, it'll pop. Otherwise, I'm just playing the waiting game. And with this one would I would end up having to sell some for BTC. And if it were to do that, then I'll keep some of that and pad it up in the longer term holdings, even though it's not the most ideal. I like doing the Doge thing, and I didn't really have a good USD option. Kraken doesn't have XD. Kraken doesn't have a USD option for Dogecoin, so I guess I could do BTREX, but too late. Or I guess I could transfer it over. Maybe something to consider, but this is like, I'd use this as a play to kind of replenish some of the BTC that I sold. All right, news. Let's see. So let me just pull this up. So actually a few news pieces on Tezos. It's kind of like when it rains, it pours. Like they just hit all these press releases all at once. This is, in my opinion, fairly major news for a couple of reasons. One, it's another STO, a real estate STO, that's using the Tezos blockchain. And there's a partnership with tZERO. So, Chris has been talking about tZERO a lot. It's basically an STO exchange. It's still new. It's not very liquid at the moment, but it is a place where people can trade tokenized securities. And oftentimes for private equity, you don't really get any places to trade private equity. Usually if you buy private equity, a lot of times you're just getting some, receipt or certificate, and then you got to go out OTC and find a buyer and do like contractual agreement, all that stuff, to transfer over the rights and stuff over the counter. You can't just log into an exchange. So there's actually a multi-trillion-dollar market that's untapped right now that the STO market can tap into, and that's the private equity market, right? That's the private real estate broken up into shares, equity in real estate, equity in private companies, just stuff that you can't really buy until it gets listed, right? Publicly listed. So to tokenize that kind of stuff. Also, another interesting thing with tokenization is you kind of, again, cut out the third party. So you're not relying on a broker to kind of prove that you have ownership of something, right? Like a centralized party to prove you have ownership. You could just keep your equity tokens in your wallet, in your Tezos wallet or whatever, as a token, and then you control those private keys. Now, obviously, that's still semi-centralized because you're buying equity into a centralized project, which is a good thing in some ways, is when it comes to STOs. So this is pretty major because there could be more stuff that they do with tZERO. And what I've noticed strategically with Tezos is, Ethereum had its ICO boom, right? Went nuts on the ICO, created a lot of demand for ETH. 2017, Ethereum went off the charts as a result of that demand. But, the brakes have been hit on that. The brakes have been hit pretty hard. The SEC pretty much killed the ICO market. So you're not really getting, and not only they didn't just kill it, but the markets kind of killed it as well. Basically, right now, from what I've seen, a lot of the ICO projects that raised money in 2017, a lot of them still have like 30% of their ETH treasury, right? And a lot of these projects have no monetization schemes, no funding schemes at all. Their only source of funding is to continuously sell Ethereum. So Ethereum, obviously Ethereum has been a little bit stagnant as a result of that. I don't necessarily think, unless it changes the game a bit, I don't necessarily think it's going to be making like aggressive gains like it used to. Obviously, with market correlation, it would probably still do all right. But one thing to contend with is that there's tons and tons of ETH now that will be continuous selling pressure from these ICOs because there's no more ICO demand, right? If ICOs are still booming, then people buying ETH to invest in new ICOs would counteract that supply and demand dynamic. It would create more demand for Ethereum to buy that so they can invest and get all hyped up about their ICOs. But because the brakes have been hit on ICOs, basically what you have now is a bunch of old ICO projects. Their only source of funding is to dump Ethereum. So what I find interesting with the Tezos approach is it seems strategically that they're staying away from the ICO market. It's not very hot. The ICO market's not hot. Of course, anybody can still launch an ICO. I mean, they still have their regulatory risks or whatnot, but no one can stop you from creating a token, right? But I've noticed that they've just been applying a lot of their energy into the STO market, which, you're buying real equity. You're buying real tokenized equity. I mean, the entire global markets are based on this for the most part, right? And so this is like kind of the front line of the next wave, the next major tech wave in crypto and blockchain is, tokenized equity. And so, this is another example. We've already seen the news from, Brazil's third largest investment bank wanting to launch STOs. There's another real estate project, I think in Asia or whatnot. So this is another one. So this is one in the UK. Also, more news broke out today. Let me see. More news broke out where they just partnered up with a German STO platform, right? Fundament Group, and they already have tokenized real estate already, right? So they just teamed up, and I'm pretty sure the Tezos Foundation is specifically targeting this. What it seems like they're doing is they're looking at STO exchanges, projects, real estate projects, and they're going out and investing in them with some of the funds and making partnership deals with them, right? Which is really smart from a strategic vantage point, because then if Tezos ends up basically becoming the go-to for all of the go-to blockchain for all of these STOs, that's a lot of financial activity and growth on the blockchain. So this is a German one. News just broke out today. They've already have some real estate. STO is basically just like security token. And not too long ago, I think we already spoke about this, but I'm going to mention it again, mid-October, so a few weeks ago, they had partnered up with another STO platform. Basically, it's a London-based capital markets automation platform called Global Cap, and they're based in London, right? So another STO company for private equity, right? And these are already regulatory approved companies, right? So they have already got regulated by the FCA. This group already has regulatory approval. So they're basically just like partnering up with already existing companies that are already doing that in that space, right? And then T0, they just made a partnership with T0. So they're really going after the STO market hard. And a lot of these projects seem to like Tezos because of the extra security you have with formal verification and all that kind of stuff, right? Not only just that, though, but let's say you are an STO platform or a company that's selling real estate or selling shares in your company or whatnot. You'd want to kind of have wouldn't you want to have a stake in the network? Wouldn't you want to have a say over the fundamentals of the network, right? So with a lot of these projects, not only can they sell private equity and tokenize it on Tezos, but then they can go and buy some XTZ and start baking and actually have voting rights over what happens with the network. So they actually have more granular control over the actual network itself, whereas like you don't really get any granular control over Ethereum. It's basically what Vitalik and co say is what's going to happen, and that's the end of it. You don't really have much of a say on that, right? So this there seems to be like a bit of a snowball effect. So it wouldn't surprise me to see a lot more of these. Apparently, a lot of these projects will be launching in Q1 of next year, so that's coming up in a few months. So it's all fairly exciting stuff, in my opinion. So yeah, this is one of the reasons why it's my second largest position and why I'm just holding it. I'm just being patient and waiting with a timeline till about at least 2021. That said, we start a new tax season in a few months. So, if there's any major price movements, if we get a bunch of news that hits Q1 and there's any major price movements, depending on what the greater meta trend is, if we get an alt season, stuff like that. If there's any, if I can hit some lower price targets, like let's say maybe even $5, then I'll be able to lock in at least a bit of profit to manage risk, since it's my largest position. I have higher targets, but it'd be nice to lock in something. And then that's basically a new tax year. So, I usually like to do a lot of my tax stuff at the beginning of the year, and that way I kind of set the stage and know exactly what I'm going to pay or whatnot. So also, like I said, December comes around. In December, I'm going to be looking at Zcash, and if it doesn't make any moves and it's still in the gutter, then in December I will be tax harvesting this. This is one position that I have. Probably this is my worst position I have right now, actually. So there's actually no benefit bag holding it into the new year. I still like Zcash, but what I would do is sell some, realize a loss to help offset some of the gains, then wait a bit, and then buy back in the new year. Buy some back in, fresh start in the new year. So that's my plan with Zcash. And that's would you cut even if not tax harvesting? Not necessarily, no. I don't think I would bother. Because if I wasn't doing it for tax harvesting, like I would still want to, I still want to be invested in Zcash. It's just there's no benefit in realizing a loss. So I think the rule is you got to wait like a month or whatever before you can buy back in or whatnot. And this market could chop around for a bit. The risk is the market takes off and makes a big move before I get to go back in or whatnot. That's not the end of the world. But if it weren't for that, cutting it to me would be like we're close to the bottom, in my opinion, right? Like I would be doing it full well knowing that I'm probably selling close to the bottom. but there's a bigger benefit to me to realize a tax loss to offset some gains, because basically, like, I've got you owe a debt to the government, pay a tax bill or whatever that cost. That's money that comes out of my savings or whatnot, my fiat, my bank. So if I can kind of offset a little bit of that, reduce that bill, then I will. But if I didn't have that, like if it weren't for that, I wouldn't necessarily be cutting, because I don't like capitulating close to the bottom. I mean, kind of, I wouldn't even surprise me if this was the bottom, right? Like we're getting pretty close, and yeah, the market looks like shit, but that's how altcoins look when they're at the bottom. They always look like garbage, right? We'll see. Who knows? Maybe it bleeds out further. Maybe I get to buy it even cheaper. I kind of doubt that. I mean, it's really, really cheap as it is, but there are some possible. There's a couple of, I guess, flaws with the model, the Zcash model. Pretty much all proof of work coins have continuous selling pressure, predominantly because miners have to pay operational expenses, electricity, hardware upgrades, warehousing, all that kind of stuff. The major miners, not just talking about the hobby miners. Hobby miners can just like buy and like mine and hold or whatever, but like anyone who's running it on an industrial level is going to have some pretty high operational costs that have to be paid in fiat. So generally, coin inflation through mining is usually considered downward selling pressure, right? We've seen it with Bitcoin and the halvings. Zcash has a halving coming up, so probably might get a little bit of hype, or it might not, right? I mean, Litecoin had a halving, and it's kind of still in the trash. I think where was the halving? Around summertime. It's kind of like selling the news type dead cat bounce event. So there's that, but then there's the founder awards, 20% founder awards, and they're funding development exclusively through this. So that's more continuous selling pressure, and they have a really high burn rate. Millions of dollars a month type of thing, or quarter. So they're continuously having to sell that on the open market. There was also, we don't know if this ever got exploited. Rocky will probably see general selling pressure during December because of tax harvesting. Yeah, that wouldn't surprise me. It wouldn't. It really wouldn't surprise me, to be honest. It wouldn't surprise me to see some pressure. Historically, Novembers tend to be a bit bullish, except for last year. We capitulated around that time, but we've seen rallies before in November in previous years. But yeah, coming up to December, there's probably going to be some more selling pressure on stuff. Oh yeah, there's a exploit. There was an exploit that was discovered. I've spoken about this before last year on Zcash, where it was possible for someone to secretly inflate an infinite supply. And the problem is that with the whole ZStart zero proof stuff, there's actually no way to audit the supply, because that's the whole point of the privacy, is like transactions like that use zero proofs are treated like freshly minted with no history and stuff. So it's kind of difficult to be able to do an audit. So they said it wasn't exploited, but you never know. You never know in this game. Someone could have exploited it and created a lot more supply in Zcash than exists. So that's another element. But number 3, though, the overall, if it was, and here's the thing, I don't want to just necessarily use that as an excuse for Zcash, because if that was the only market that was in the gutter that tanked, then, you know, I could point the finger at Zcash, call it Zcrash or whatever. And, but, you know, everything fell into the gutter. So there's also just general market correlation around Bitcoin and around the trends and stuff. So it's not like I can necessarily pick on that one market per se, right? Even though its bounces as of late have been a lot weaker than many other markets. Like, when was the last time it actually had a decent bounce? And I think it even underperformed. I think it was here, and pretty sure this underperformed a lot of things. We had a little alt bounce here. I mean, 173%, I guess it's okay, but you know, there were other things that popped like 300 plus, 400%. Tezos went up like 450% or something like that. So this is kind of like in the so-so category, right? It really wouldn't surprise me though if we bounce off of this support here, but we'll see in December. I'm probably down a good chunk on Zcash anyway, so even if it did bounce, regardless of where it bounced, I'd probably, if I sold, I'd probably still be selling it at a loss. So chances are it's going to go in the chopping block temporarily on the chopping block come December, just adjusting the sales. So, but I still like the project. Those are my criticisms of it. I still like the project. I'm not a fan that they want to extend the founder rewards to fund development. That kind of gets a little bit wishy-washy with the social contract and takes a lot of the steam out of the whole halving and all that stuff. Because if it weren't for that, then there'd be a lot less selling pressure per se. I mean, there's the miners selling pressure, but you know, miners still have the option of holding, whereas like when they're funding development, they're just constantly selling, right? Unless they're paying their developers in Zcash, and unless those developers are holding the Zcash, but the instant they get paid in Zcash, then they probably have to pay tax on that, so they're going to have to sell some anyways, unless they're tax-free jurisdiction, so on and so forth. So, anyways, but out of all this for me is some of the biggest news, so I can stop lamenting about. I can basically get back into the Bitcoin hustle, fully get back into it. So, looking forward to that. All right. Do you think Tezos implementation of zero knowledge affects Zcash price in general? Will it affect Zcash's price? Good question. I don't know. I mean, if it did, I think it would mostly just be hype. You know, like sometimes whales will just use any old excuse if there's enough hype in something to push the market. Fundamentally, I don't see how that would affect the supply-demand dynamic of Zcash. What I like about the Tezos implementation of it, though, is it's not going to be baked default into the protocol. So you'll still be able to do an audit of supply and stuff like that. Or if there's regulatory risks around privacy coins, it mitigates all of that because it's not at the protocol level. They're basically going to implement it so that you can create zero-proof smart contracts and basically lock some XTZ into a smart contract and then have an anonymous version of it, token, that's untraceable. So it kind of just becomes like an extra added feature that, you know, let's say private financial institutions or companies or whatever, if they don't want all their finances being clearly visible to the public, that gives them an option for financial privacy. And the fact that it's optional means that it basically takes out all of the regulatory risk, in my opinion. So it's a pretty smart move. Initially, I was concerned if they're going to bake it into the protocol. I was like, probably not the best move to do that. But the fact that it's just going to be a like baked into smart contract capabilities, I think that just gives it more utility. So, all right, we'll end it there. So I'll process this video and send it out. Let's see. All right. I mean, that it might negatively affect the value of a privacy coin like Zcash because it becomes a general feature that can be implemented by their blockchain. Yeah, actually, that's valid. It's valid, and this is the thing too with a lot of these open source crypto projects. Blockchain is they're open source, so pretty much anybody can copy the features and amalgamate the features, which is one of the reasons why I'm bullish on Tezos, because by design, it's made its protocol malleable where it can pretty much absorb any features at once from any project. So it's just going to keep taking on all the best features of every project and getting bigger and bigger, having more and more utility, which I think is really, really, that in and of itself makes it highly adaptable and gives it a lot of survivability. So, but yeah, you're right. It could affect Zcash because, you know, if you can get the same Zcash privacy features using smart contracts or other coins, and Zcash is basically just kind of like a very simple pocket calculator without any smart contracting abilities or any of that stuff, then, you know, how useful is it at the end of the day? Its utility only comes from how often people transact in it for transactions, you know. And see, I guess another problem too with Zcash is that, like, let's say it were ever to be used for, you know, let's say the dark markets or something like that. Well, there's a single company you could go after. It's not like, you know, let's say Monero, where, yeah, there's Fluffy Pony or whatever, the lead developer, but it's like there's no company that necessarily controls it per se. But anyways, I still like the project, but I'm going to gonna have to put on the chopping block for temporarily on the chopping block come December. I'm not going to do that now, though. I'm going to wait till the end of the year. Predominantly because, you know, anything could happen from then to now, right? Your risk of losing a good entry to get back in increases if you do it now. So, all right, folks. Hope everyone has a great weekend. And if anything changes, I'll be in the trading room. And if ICX and Waves break support, then I'm just going to cut those. All right, take care, folks. Cheers.